as someone who has family members who are very much pro-life, right? I kind of, the way I engage with them is like, okay, yeah, pro-life, like, yeah, let's put all the places in life in place so that way we can be pro-life. We can support the kids who are born by making sure they're fed, making sure they have a place to sleep, making sure they have good education, good, recreational opportunities so they're not having to make difficult decisions. Let's be pro-life. Let's support housing for families, making sure it's much more affordable, making sure they can live in the neighborhoods they want to live in.
Gun safety.
Gun safety. Let's be pro-life. Let's talk about how we can, keep guns out of the hands of people who don't need them, and making sure that for people who do have them, that they're abiding by the laws that we have. There's a lot of ways we can be pro-life and support family. I agree. But at the same time, I think we also need to recognize that, for women, for people who can give birth, that is a very personal decision. That is it's the type of decision that you make with your partner, with your family, with your doctor. And, you get a chance to decide how you want to use your body. And I think it's unfair for us as the state to say, well, once you become pregnant, your body is now under the purview of state control. Right, And to me, that doesn't really square with a lot of other spaces in our culture where we're like, you are your own person, you're independent, you do things on your own, right? But here it's like, oh no, you can't do that. And I think just kind of teasing out those things with people, particularly if it's people that you're close to and you love, I always encourage people, don't go in defensive, or don't go in trying to make them defensive, but really stop and listen and try to figure out the pieces of, what they really care about, because it's probably also something you really care about too, but you're just approaching it from different sides or different perspectives. And if you can kind of get on that, you sort of start to get to a place where you can have a real conversation about it. And so that's what I do with my family members. And many of them, we're probably a little bit different on it, but they do understand that no, there has to be a way for the person who is carrying the child to be able to say what they want to do. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think the way you've laid out all of these things, all of these issues, every justice issue that you can think of comes under this frame of life-giving, of human rights in a way. And that lines up with this framework of reproductive justice. I mentioned articulated first by Black women about 30 years ago, Loretta Ross and some others. And the framework is the right to have children, the right to not have children, and the right to raise our children in safe and healthy environments. One of the most important things we can do is learn to tell our stories. And I would say that every person in this room and on this planet, whether you have children or not, every one of us, by dint of being human, has a reproductive story. And learning to be able to tell those without shame, without stigma, is liberatory. It was learning to tell my story. I've been working in this work in reproductive freedom for quite a while, and it was only in the last couple of years that I've been able to add the S on abortions because of that kind of a framework of safe, legal, and rare, right? Rare adds a stigma, and I was no more ready to parent at the time of my second abortion than I was my first, but it took me a while to work past that stigma. And I say, I've told my story a lot, and I've boiled it down to, I am the mom and spouse and daughter and friend and minister and citizen and artist, the human that I am, because I was able to get safe and dignified and compassionate health care in Texas when I needed it back in the day. And I want every person to have that bodily autonomy. Now, were it not for my decision to terminate 2 pregnancies when it was the right decision for me to make, I would not have the daughter that I have now, who will say I'm a pretty good mom, It was the most important decision that I was going to make. So nobody has to agree with my decision, but I have no shame about it because I've worked through that sense of shame and stigma by telling the story. And I am glad and grateful for my abortions. That's not everyone's story. I know a woman who says, I'm 51% sure I made the right decision. And so it's different for each person on the planet, but we own our stories. And I think the function of authoritarianism, which is the system that's making these laws that say there's exactly one way to be a man and exactly one way to be a woman, and it's only binary. There's only one way for you to be that, and if you step outside that, your body is wrong. Your decisions are wrong. And as a religious leader, I'm not having it. I serve a humanist congregation, and so we're really interested in good public policy and evidence-based outcomes. But I think we have to really look at who's telling us those things that engender shame. And I just think we're not having that. And that's the narrative that we need to counter with love and compassion and all of that. But I'm not having narratives that say you are shameful in who you are. That's not what we do. If the most important thing I think we can do right now to help people who want to terminate their pregnancies, who need to come to Minnesota to do so, is to donate to Our Justice. OurJustice.net is the state abortion fund, and they provide logistical and financial support to Minnesotans and people who are trying to get here, transportation, lodging, and support for the procedures itself. When Roe was first overturned, there was this lovely, generous impulse that I heard, mostly from white women, who said, we need to create safe houses, and we need to create a so-called underground railroad for people who are coming from other states. And people who are already working in the issue, mostly people who are led by the frame of reproductive justice, which was first articulated by black women some 30 years ago, said, we're already doing it. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you really want to do something, host a house party. And that maybe doesn't feel like, oh, I'm really giving people a ride. And there may be an opportunity for rides. But when people are coming for care, and that's if you're on the way to for abortion care, or if you're on the way for gender-affirming care, let's say that as well, you're already in a pretty stressful situation. You may be traveling with young children. You don't know if the person you're going to stay with is culturally competent. You don't know if you're going to, what you're going to face there. You don't know if it's a safe house, for, in terms of cleanliness, whatever. The best thing we can do is support the organizations that are already doing the work. So dollar for dollar, when I want to support this work, I donate to OurJustice.net.
It is true. The mechanisms are there. There are ways to plug in. There are ways to be involved. And there are people who have been in this fight much longer than I have. And I think would appreciate the help and support. So I'll just reiterate that. Overall, I come from the electoral political space. So of course, if, in a state like Minnesota, we are working on passing these laws, but continue to press right now. The path of this bill is it's in the Senate. So continue to press on your senators to say, I know you say you're standing up for reproductive rights. Where are we on this bill? Where are we on other bills? They need to hear from you. But we know that once it gets passed in the Senate, the governor has said that he's going to sign it. So, we're looking forward to that. And continue also talking to your neighbors, writing those stories, changing the narrative. I think one of the things that's really important that I continue to learn for any issue is making sure that we have the right narrative in place so people understand what it is we're trying to do. And in the reproductive health care space, I think a lot of people are, get sort of lost on this idea of protecting the child. And that's important, I believe that. But at the same time, the person who's carrying the child is also a full human being, and we need to protect that person as well. And so I think there's some dialogue that can continue to be had there of understanding that this is not only about this, potentiality of an unborn child, but the full potential of the human that's in front of you. So.